Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo was born on October 16, 1936, in the small village of Yabloknoy, in what is now Ukraine. From early childhood, his life was difficult. His family faced hardships, and the environment after World War II was harsh and unstable. Even as a young boy, he experienced feelings of loneliness, social isolation, and pressure from adults. Outwardly, Andrei appeared to be an ordinary, quiet person. He studied diligently, showed an interest in books and culture, and later enrolled in university to study philology. After serving in the army, he worked as a telecommunications engineer and later taught Russian language and literature at a boarding school. At first glance to society, he seemed to be a model citizen, disciplined, hardworking, and even active in public life. But behind this outward normality, there was a dark and dangerous side. Chikatilo had the ability to conceal his intentions, manipulate people, and act secretly. These qualities allowed him to remain undetected for years. How can a person who appears ordinary and quiet hide such a dark side for so many years? The first known murder occurred in December 1978. The victim was a young girl whom he lured to an isolated location. From that moment, a long and horrifying chain of crimes began, stretching over more than 10 years. Chikatilo carefully selected his victims, mostly women and children. His crimes occurred in various regions of the USSR, including Rostov Oblast, Krasnodar Krai, Moscow, and Leningrad regions. Each episode, despite appearing chaotic on the surface, followed certain patterns that later allowed investigators to determine that a single person was responsible. He acted cautiously, moving between towns, choosing isolated locations, and sometimes using train and bus stations where he could easily make contact with potential victims. His ability to hide and manipulate people made him an extremely difficult target for law enforcement. Chikatilo remained at large for several reasons. 1. Features of Soviet criminology. Serial murders were considered rare, and many investigative agencies treated crimes as isolated incidents. 2. Errors and underestimation by investigators. He was checked and detained multiple times for suspicious behavior, but there was insufficient evidence for an arrest. 3. Manipulation and disguise. He could appear quiet, normal, and respectable, creating the impression that he was incapable of committing crimes. In 1984, he was detained for suspicious behavior at a train station but was released due to a lack of evidence. This case demonstrated how easily a criminal could exploit weaknesses in the system. Viewer intrigue. Imagine how many lives could have been saved if the authorities had correctly assessed these warning signs. By the early 1980s, the number of victims was increasing, and investigators began to realize the full scale of the problem. Special task forces were created to identify patterns in the perpetrator's actions. Investigators began compiling psychological profiles, analyzing crime locations, timing, and victim behavior. This was a new approach for Soviet criminology. Previously, serial killers were simply not considered a separate category. Chikatilo's movements, contacts, and social connections were carefully studied. Despite this, he continued committing crimes, exploiting both systemic weaknesses and his own caution. Question to the viewer: how can a person remain undetected for so long, even under the observation of professional investigators? The turning point came in November 1990. Chikatilo was arrested in Novocherkassk after his strange and suspicious behavior drew the attention of police officers. During a search, items were found that linked him to a series of murders. Investigators took him to locations connected with the crimes and compared his statements with the evidence. Chikatilo provided detailed accounts of the crimes, which became key evidence for the trial. The trial of Chikatilo began in 1992 and became one of the largest and most high-profile trials in the country's history. The case files contained hundreds of volumes and included dozens of criminal episodes. Chikatilo attempted to behave erratically and evade direct answers, creating an impression of indifference. Expert examinations confirmed his sanity, and the evidence established his involvement in the majority of the crimes. On October 15, 1992, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. The sentence was carried out in February 1994. Psychological profile and analysis. Chikatilo is an example of a person leading a double life. Outwardly quiet, unremarkable, and socially successful, yet internally a criminal with a pathological drive for violence. His story demonstrates how childhood trauma can influence personality, how a person can exploit the trust of others to commit crimes, how system errors and underestimation of warning signs can lead to tragic consequences. Investigators and criminologists drew lessons from his case. Psychological analysis, profiling, and a comprehensive approach to investigating serial crimes are essential to identifying such criminals. The Chikatilo case became a precedent for Russian criminology. It drew attention to the importance of psychology, behavioral analysis, coordination between agencies, and the careful scrutiny of suspicious individuals. Chikatilo's story continues to be studied as an example of how human psychology, social conditions, and systemic errors can combine to produce tragic consequences. Every time we think, this could never happen to us, it is important to remember that killers can hide among us for decades if the system underestimates the warning signs.